fast forwarding us to the book of Revelation where it says that I saw that God's name was written in the foreheads of the 144,000.
That's right.
This is the spiritual house that God is going to have, and this is where he began the work, right back here in the story of Solomon. These are object lessons. For Solomon, in his day it was present truth. But God was trying to accomplish the very same thing in Solomon as he's trying to do in the 144,000. God's purpose was to write his name not in the stone building at Jerusalem, but in Solomon's heart and life, in his character. And had he followed God's purpose, it would have been accomplished. But when he chose his own selfish ways, there was disaster. This is the history of the Adventist Church. We are our own worst enemies.
Yeah.
Now notice this. We're going to get now fast forward. We're going to come down to the day of Jeroboam.
Okay.
After the death of Solomon, we know that the Davidic kingdom was divided. Under this spirit of covetousness that had been brought in by King Solomon, this is the ultimate reality of why the kingdom was divided. This eventually would lead Judas to sell Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. This is the commencement of why they had to be taken into captivity for 2,520 years.
To purge.
The 2520.
The 2520 is the legitimate result of Solomon's covetousness, which had rubbed off on the people of Israel until they would reject God in the worship of the golden calves at Dan and at Bethel under the reign of Jeroboam. And for this cause, God caused the 10 tribes to be wiped from the face of the earth by the Assyrian power in 723 BC. And in this story, the 2520, when God reestablishes his spiritual house, ends in 1798. Thereby, ipso facto, we've connected the controversy in heaven, the war in heaven, with the spiritual selfishness of King Solomon in his day to the day of the Millerites. And by the way, to our own selfishness today.
Amen. Okay.
Now listen to what this says. This is a book by a man who is a contemporary of Ellen White. His name is Edersheim.
Who?
Edersheim. Edersheim. He was a theologian in England. This is going to tell you some of the details of King Solomon. But yet another and far more serious danger threatened Solomon's throne. Besides adversaries, Solomon eventually, he was no longer this man of peace, but on every side he turned there was controversy because of his own sins. And Edersheim picks up the story. He says, but yet another and far more serious danger threatened Solomon's throne. Besides adversaries without elements of disaffection were at work within Palestine, meaning in his own land, which were only needed favoring circumstances to lead to open revolt. Rebellion leads to open revolt. This will be not because of rebellion. When the Sunday law comes, it will be a revolt. Because of the rebellion right back here. You have to get to the cause to get to the cure. Listen to what this says. First, there was the old tribal jealousy between Ephraim and Judah. Ellen White says that in the 10 tribes that Ephraim was the ringleader in the rebellion, in the revolt. There was a jealousy. The high destiny foretold to Ephraim in Genesis chapter 48 verses 17 through 22 and 49 verses 23 through 26 must have excited hopes which the leadership of Joshua himself at Ephraimite in Numbers 8:8 seemed for a time to warrant. In other words, if you read these texts, you'll see that there were great hopes implicit in the conditional promises based upon Ephraim carrying out the promises that, or the conditions that God had laid down, not only for Ephraim, but for all the tribes. Commanding perhaps the most important territorial position in the land, Ephraim claimed a dominating power over the tribes in the days of Gideon and Japheth. Judges 8 verses 1 and 12:1. In fact, one of the successors of these judges, Abaddon, was an Ephraimite. Judges 12:13. But besides, Ephraim could boast not only of secular, but of ecclesiastical supremacy. Brothers and sisters, this is the union of church and state in the time of the judges.
Where? How?
Because they had this, but besides, Ephraim could boast not only of secular, but ecclesiastical supremacy. Since Shiloh, that's where the tabernacle was at,
Yes,
that was up in
yes.
Ephraim. That's how. That's how. The how of their ecclesiastical supremacy is because that's where the tabernacle that Moses built in the wilderness had been placed,
Right.
in Ephraim.
Right.
And Kiriath Jearim were within its tribal possessions. And had not Samuel, the greatest of the judges, the one outstanding personality in the history of a decrepit priesthood, been, though a Levite, well, now you're going to get some information that will help you understand your Old Testament history. Yet Samuel was from Mount Ephraim. Samuel was an Ephraimite. Oh my, now we know, now we see what God is doing in these stories. His mother was a woman, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
she couldn't bear.
Right.
What's a
Right.
woman in the church, in the Bible?
Church.
The church.
Church couldn't bear.
But this woman who couldn't bear, God gave her a son.
Yes.
And he was an Ephraimite.
Right.
And he was the greatest of all the judges and all the
That's
priests
right.
of his
Amen.
time.
That's right.
And you think about what this means when it says in the book of Revelation that I saw the woman clothed in white and the sun and moon on her head, and she stood on the sun on her head and a moon under her feet. This is the story of how God has always led a people, even in the most terrible apostasy. And Samuel is an example of this.
That's right.
Even the authority of Samuel could not secure the undisputed acknowledgement of Saul. We read earlier on the back of this book, Saul's authority was undisputed, right?
Right.
Even though Samuel had been raised up by the direct miracle of God himself
Yes.
through the prayers of his mother. The tragic union of church and state in the 4th century brought forth the birth of the ungainly hybrid. What he's talking about is in the days of Pergamos when Constantine joins paganism with Christianity. It's called an ungainly hybrid, this man calls it. That for which King Saul had been rejected by God was introduced with much acclaim by the Emperor Constantine. So the authority that Solomon had claimed, Constantine claimed. Yeah, whoa. This is at the heart of this controversy right here at the end of the world. Now listen to this. Even the authority of Samuel could not secure the undisputed acknowledgement of Samuel, or Saul rather, who was only too painfully conscious of the objections which tribal jealousy would raise to his elevation as king.
Excuse me. So, King Saul was jealous of David.
That's another part of the story.
Okay.
We're actually covering some groundwork.
No, what I wanted to find out, what was the jealousy of King Saul that caused him to be like this?
It's recorded in the book of Samuel. We're going to get there.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
We're trying to get there.
Okay.